There are films that entertain, films that challenge, and then there are films that leave something behind, an imprint that refuses to fade once the screen goes dark. Most audiences walk out of a theater with a handful of impressions or a momentary emotional echo. But every so often, a small group of viewers reports something far stranger, recurring nightmares they never had before, déjà vu that lasts for days, the sense of being out of sync with time, or an unexplained shift in mood that feels foreign, almost imposed. These claims don't happen with banned films or underground experiments. They come from widely released, fully legal sci-fi movies that played in mainstream theaters and appeared on ordinary streaming platforms. Studios have never addressed the reports. Scientists have never offered anything resembling confirmation. Yet, the testimonies persist, spread across forums, buried in early reviews, whispered among audiences who felt something they couldn't easily categorize. Some spoke about sound frequencies that seemed too low to consciously hear, but impossible to ignore. Others described visual rhythms, color pulses, or cuts that triggered unfamiliar emotional spikes. In different countries, at different times, people described the same reactions: dreams looping, memories bending, a strange clarity that disappeared the moment they tried to hold on to it. Then something even more curious occurred. Without announcement, several films in this category received quiet updates. Audio mixes softened, scenes trimmed by a few seconds, tone mapping adjusted, color timing altered. No patch notes, no official explanations. Versions simply changed, as if someone wanted the edges dulled just enough. Tonight, we reopen that vault. These are the 15 films that viewers claim altered their state of mind in ways no one has been able to explain. Not because of what the stories told, but because of something woven into the experience itself, subtle, untraceable, and never publicly acknowledged. If even one of these accounts holds truth, then the line between cinema and cognition may be thinner than anyone imagined. 1. Arrival, 2016. Arrival generated widespread acclaim, but beneath the critical praise lay a quieter stream of reports describing unexpected psychological effects. Many viewers experienced unusually intense déjà vu after watching, sometimes lasting for hours. Routine tasks, making coffee, checking a phone, walking through a doorway, felt momentarily familiar in a way that transcended normal recognition. A few people described a brief sense that time was folding inward, as though past and present were brushing against each other. These sensations were mild but remarkably consistent among those who experienced them. Some viewers also reported a strange emotional afterglow, a mix of clarity, melancholy, and disorientation that lingered long after the film ended. For some, sounds seemed sharper, while other noises seemed muted, as if their sensory priorities had been temporarily rearranged. A handful even described dreaming in circular narratives for several nights, stories that looped back to earlier points without feeling incoherent, mirroring the film's non-linear temporal structure. Experts have suggested that Arrival's unique pacing, slow, deliberate, and deeply immersive, combined with Jóhann Jóhannsson's resonant score, may push viewers into a heightened introspective state. The oscillating tones and organic vocal textures seem to activate emotional processing before rational understanding kicks in, leaving viewers unusually open to associative thinking. This may explain why some feel as though time itself became more fluid after the film. Later home releases showed minor but noticeable differences. Certain sound frequencies softened, and the color grading in key scenes slightly adjusted. Though subtle, these shifts suggest that early theatrical versions may have exerted a stronger atmospheric pull on the senses. For those who experienced it, Arrival didn't simply tell a story about perceiving time differently, it briefly invited the mind to try it, leaving a faint imprint of non-linear awareness that fades only slowly, like a memory that hasn't fully settled. 2. Stalker 1979. Stalker has long been described as a hypnotic experience, but a surprising number of viewers report psychological effects that extend beyond poetic melancholy. Some describe a strange auditory phenomenon after watching, hearing faint, non-existent sounds in quiet rooms, such as distant water drips, soft industrial hums, or muffled footsteps. These phantom noises often mirror textures from the film itself, as though the zone's sonic ambiance lingers in the mind. Most claim these effects fade quickly, but the similarity of the accounts across decades is striking. Other viewers reported emotional disturbances, a sudden, inexplicable sadness, heightened introspection, or a sensation of being pulled inward. as if the film had temporarily redirected their attention away from external reality. A few described the world feeling subtly out of focus, not visually but emotionally, as though normal motivations were distant echoes. The film's emphasis on longing and existential uncertainty seems to leave a psychological imprint that takes time to unwind. Cinematically, Tarkovsky's use of long, meditative takes and haunting environmental soundscapes may be responsible. The film's slow rhythm pulls the brain into a contemplative state, and when it abruptly ends, viewers may find themselves struggling to readjust. The switch between sepia-toned and full-color sequences also creates an unusual perceptual oscillation that some claim affects their memory clarity right after viewing. Fans comparing different home releases have identified subtle alterations, muted audio textures, slightly different color temperatures, and marginal shifts in pacing caused by micro-edits. None of these adjustments have been acknowledged officially, fueling speculation that earlier versions may have been more psychologically demanding. In the end, Stalker leaves a residue, a lingering vibration of mood and perception. For some, it feels as though the zone has followed them home, whispering faint reminders through the spaces of their everyday world. 3. The Double 2013. The Double quietly developed a reputation for unsettling viewers in ways that seem disproportionate to its modest scale. Many first-time watchers reported experiencing a form of emotional dislocation shortly after finishing the film, an acute awareness of their own behavior, as though observing themselves from a short distance. Some described the strange feeling that their facial expressions were not entirely their own, or that their gestures felt rehearsed, as if they were imitating a version of themselves rather than acting naturally. This uncanny self-consciousness often faded within hours, but its intensity left a lingering impression. Others noted perceptual anomalies consistent with themes of identity fragmentation. A number of viewers said that for a brief period after watching the film, familiar environments felt vaguely unfamiliar, as if spatial arrangements were slightly altered or lighting was subtly wrong. Some described reflections in windows or mirrors appearing momentarily delayed or seeming less connected to their real-time movements, a fleeting sensation that nonetheless alarmed them. Discussions online highlighted that the film's abrasive sound design and claustrophobic compositions may contribute to this reaction. The constant drone of oppressive industrial noise, paired with tight, off-centered framing, creates a visual and auditory pressure that can leave the viewer's senses overstimulated. The film's surreal pacing, where scenes bleed into one another without clear emotional transitions, may also temporarily disrupt the mental boundaries people rely on to maintain stable self-perception. Archivists comparing releases have noticed minor differences between international and domestic cuts. Shadows lightened, tones softened, and certain abrupt edits smoothed. While these changes were subtle, some enthusiasts speculated that earlier versions may have inadvertently amplified dissociative feelings. Ultimately, The Double stands as a film that doesn't simply depict psychological fragmentation, it subtly recreates it, leaving viewers with the unnerving sense that their identity is momentarily porous, their thoughts slightly misaligned, and their reflection just a fraction slower than it should be. 4. The Fountain, 2006. The Fountain is often remembered for its sweeping emotional scope, but a quieter subset of viewers has long reported psychological effects that seem to outlast the film's runtime. Many described entering a contemplative haze after watching an almost meditative stillness, accompanied by a strange detachment from daily concerns. Some wrote that the film's fusion of timelines and metaphysical imagery created emotional echoes that resurfaced for days, prompting sudden waves of longing or grief without a clear trigger. A number of viewers also reported unusual dream activity. They described floating through vast cosmic spaces, seeing golden nebulae, or encountering recurring symbols reminiscent of the film's circular imagery. These dreams were typically peaceful but carried an uncanny familiarity, as though the images had been drawn from memories rather than imagination. A few even mentioned experiencing momentary time dilation upon waking, feeling as if they had been asleep for much longer or shorter than reality. Researchers and critics have speculated that the combination of Clint Mansell's score built on repeating motifs and resonant strings and Aronofsky's use of macro photography created a sensory pattern that the brain internalizes. The repetition of visual and musical cycles may mimic certain meditative or hypnotic effects, which could explain the lingering emotional states described by viewers. Interestingly, early festival cuts of The Fountain included slightly longer transitions between its three timelines, intensifying the sense of cyclical recurrence. These cuts were later trimmed for pacing, and some fans believe the original version exerted a stronger psychological pull. Others noted differences in color grading across releases, with warmer tones in specific sequences being muted in later editions. To many who experienced it, The Fountain didn't simply tell a story about life, death, and rebirth. It temporarily altered their emotional compass. The boundary between cinematic experience and inner reflection blurred, leaving a resonance that felt personal, intimate, and strangely difficult to shake. 5. Beyond the Black Rainbow, 2010. Beyond the Black Rainbow is a film that feels like it was engineered to disturb perception, even though it was made with entirely conventional filmmaking techniques. Viewers frequently describe entering a trance-like state during the movie's slower sequences, particularly those dominated by saturated reds and deep synthetic drones. Afterward, many reported feeling a lingering sense of dissociation, as though their thoughts were slightly delayed or muffled, mirroring the film's oppressive atmosphere. Some wrote that bright colors in real life appeared oversaturated for hours, while dim spaces seemed to pulse faintly in their peripheral vision. A recurring theme among viewer accounts is the sensation of slipping mentally during certain scenes, moments where they momentarily forgot they were watching a film at all, only to snap back with a jolt of unease. Online discussions suggest that the movie's hypnotic rhythm, long static shots, and droning score may push the brain into a state akin to sensory fatigue, prompting temporary alterations in visual or emotional processing. Sound design plays a major role in this phenomenon. Early theatrical and festival versions reportedly contained slightly harsher synth tones during key sequences, particularly those featuring Dr. Arborea and the Arborea Institute's interior chambers. Listeners described vibrations in their sternum or a creeping tingling in their arms during these scenes. Later home releases softened these frequencies, though the changes were never publicly addressed. Another strange pattern emerged among viewers watching the film late at night. Reports of unusually vivid dreams featuring geometric shapes, pulsating corridors, or faceless figures. These dreams often shared the film's sterile color palette, suggesting that its aesthetic had imprinted itself on the subconscious. For some, the effects faded quickly. For others, the sense of drifting through a slow, synthetic world lingered well into the next day. Because of these reactions, Beyond the Black Rainbow gained a small but persistent reputation as a film that doesn't merely depict altered states, it appears, to certain viewers, to induce them. 6. Donnie Darko, 2001. From its earliest screenings, Donnie Darko inspired a wave of viewer reactions that stretched far beyond typical cult film fascination. People reported experiencing unusually strong déjà vu in the hours following their first watch moments, where they felt an uncanny sense of repetition, as though mundane actions had already occurred in a slightly different version of their day. Some described walking through familiar streets or hallways with the uneasy impression that they were following predetermined paths, mirroring the film's themes of manipulated timelines. A handful even reported dreaming of coursing energy tunnels similar to those depicted around Donnie, visualizing them not as special effects, but as organic structures guiding movement. Others experienced a kind of emotional aftershock, sudden melancholy, inexplicable nostalgia, or an uneasy feeling that something important had been forgotten. These sensations weren't universal, but the consistency among those affected raised questions within online communities. Several viewers mentioned hearing faint echoes of dialogue internal rather than auditory hours after the credits rolled, especially the whispered lines associated with Frank. Whether these were simple memory reverberations or something deeper became a topic of speculation. The film's audio mix has long been noted for its use of low, pulsing frequencies beneath certain scenes. Early DVD and theatrical versions contained subtle differences in these tones, particularly during the jet engine and time loop sequences. Some fans believe the original mix inadvertently amplified emotional suggestibility, contributing to the reports of déjà vu and dream intrusion. Later releases appeared to soften some of these frequencies, though this was never formally acknowledged. Ultimately, Donnie Darko became known not just for its enigmatic story, but for the persistent sense of temporal displacement it left behind. For those susceptible to its strange gravity, reality itself seemed briefly permeable, shimmering with the possibility that time might bend in ways they couldn't fully grasp. 7. Perfect Blue, 1997. Although Perfect Blue is often discussed for its psychological intensity, fewer people talk about the peculiar after effects some viewers have reported since its release. Many described a sense of lingering unreality, as though the boundary between their internal thoughts and the external world had thinned. After watching the film, some viewers experienced brief but unsettling moments of misremembering recent events, believing they had already performed a task, spoken a phrase, or seen a particular image earlier in the day. These memory echoes, while fleeting, were consistent enough across different audiences to attract quiet attention. Others reported experiencing heightened self-awareness for several hours, an almost intrusive observation of their own actions, mirroring the film's themes of fractured identity. A number of viewers wrote online that reflections in mirrors felt momentarily unfamiliar, or that they perceived slight delays between their thoughts and emotional responses. These sensations were not harmful, but they created a temporary sense of psychological dislocation that aligned uncannily with the film's narrative. Audio seemed to play a key role. Certain early releases of Perfect Blue featured sharper, high-frequency tones during moments of tension, sounds that some viewers claimed caused physical reactions, such as chills, jaw tightness, or a prickling sensation along the scalp. Later remasters muted these peaks, smoothing the sonic profile in ways that fans immediately noticed, even if no official explanation was given. Visually, the film's abrupt transitions between fantasy and reality may contribute to the lingering confusion. The jump cuts and overlapping imagery demand that viewers constantly reassess what they're seeing, a cognitive stressor that a few reported carrying with them afterward. Some noted they experienced short bursts of déjà vu, particularly in crowded places, as though the film had temporarily rewired their pattern recognition filters. Over time, Perfect Blue has built a reputation not just as a disturbing psychological thriller, but as a film that leaves a small cognitive residue, an echo of fractured identity that quietly trails the viewer as the credits fade. Number 8. Solaris, 1972. Tarkovsky's Solaris has always operated on a frequency unlike other sci-fi films, but its psychological impact on certain viewers borders on the uncanny. Many who first encountered the film in theaters during the 1970 seconds described a strange heaviness afterward, a feeling as though gravity had increased, or as if time were flowing more slowly. Others reported unusually vivid dreams of the Solaris Ocean, often taking place in rooms from their own childhood homes, blending memory and imagination in ways that felt disturbingly natural. These dreams frequently involved soft ripples of light or objects moving without visible cause, echoing the film's quiet metaphysics. In more recent years, viewers online shared accounts of emotional disturbances after watching the film, sudden waves of melancholy, unexplained longing, or the sense that unresolved memories were being pushed to the surface. Some described feeling observed, not by another person, but by an unnamed presence, an echo of the film's sentient planet. A number of first-time watchers also mentioned mild spatial distortions, hallways appearing slightly elongated, or rooms feeling subtly reconfigured, a sensation that faded after a few hours. Cognitive researchers have noted that Solaris uses extended static shots and near-motionless compositions that can disrupt typical attention patterns. Instead of guiding viewers through emotional beats, Tarkovsky suspends them in contemplative stillness, which some minds struggle to reconcile. The result may be a form of perceptual lag, where the viewer's internal processing continues long after the scene changes. Archivists comparing prints from different decades have noted quiet alterations in certain releases, minor audio softening, changes in color tint, and alterations in the duration of specific shots. These adjustments, never publicly acknowledged, have led some fans to believe that early versions of Solaris were even more psychologically demanding than those available today. Though no scientific explanation exists, Solaris remains one of the rare films that feels as though it reaches into the viewer, stirring emotional and perceptual currents that linger long after the final frame dissolves. 9. 2001. A Space Odyssey 1968. From its original release in 1968, 2001, A Space Odyssey became a cultural event, but buried beneath the praise were reports of reactions that slipped beyond ordinary cinematic influence. Early theatergoers described a strange dizziness that lingered after the film, not the type associated with motion sickness, but something closer to a brief loss of spatial calibration, like stepping off an escalator that wasn't moving. Others recounted vivid, almost hallucinatory dreams involving infinite corridors, rotating rooms, or color tunnels that mirrored the film's Stargate sequence. What made these accounts remarkable was their uniformity. Even viewers who had never spoken to one another described the same swirling chromatic patterns appearing behind their eyelids as they tried to sleep. Decades later, in online retrospectives, new viewers reported similarly uncanny effects. Many mentioned a temporary sense of emotional detachment, as though normal concerns felt distant or irrelevant for hours after watching. Some wrote that everyday objects, lamps, clocks, door frames, looked slightly alien in the moments immediately following the film, as if their mind had not fully re-anchored to familiar reality. A few even described hearing faint, lingering tones hours after leaving the theater, usually during quiet environments, though no external source existed. Film scholars have suggested that these reactions might stem from Kubrick's use of long takes, dissonant music, and visual abstraction. The Stargate sequence, built from slit-scan photography, creates a visual rhythm that overwhelms typical perceptual cues, forcing the brain into a state closer to sensory overload. Combined with the slow, ritualistic pacing, the film leaves viewers in an altered cognitive state that doesn't immediately reset when the credits roll. Interestingly, some modern remasters softened certain high-contrast frames and smoothed abrupt transitions within the Stargate sequence. These modifications, though minor, have not gone unnoticed by dedicated archivists who insist early cuts were more disorienting. Whether these changes were artistic, technical, or deliberate is unknown. What remains clear is that 2001: A Space Odyssey has an effect that extends beyond its runtime, leaving behind echoes of visual and emotional dislocation that generations of viewers continue to report. 10. Primer 2004. Primer already has a legendary reputation for being one of the most mentally demanding sci-fi films ever made, but scattered viewer reports describe effects beyond simple confusion. Many first-time watchers claimed they felt mentally compressed, as though their thoughts had become tangled in the film's dense web of timelines. For several hours afterward, some experienced mild cognitive fatigue, momentary difficulty tracking conversations, losing their train of thought mid-sentence, or feeling as though they were thinking slightly behind real time. Online, people described experiencing phantom loops in their memory shortly after viewing brief moments where they felt as if they had already performed a task seconds before actually doing it. Others reported spatial disorientation, certain rooms in their home feeling smaller or larger than usual, or the odd sensation that they had approached an object from the wrong angle. Such experiences were short-lived but consistent enough to generate discussion threads across forums dedicated to puzzle films. One persistent rumor suggested that the movie's editing rhythm, abrupt cuts, overlapping dialogue, and scenes stripped of emotional cues forced the brain into a heightened state of analytical processing. Because the story offers no narrative guideposts, viewers must construct the film's structure themselves, and for some, that cognitive strain seemed to spill outward into their perception afterward. A few viewers shared anecdotes of time dilation, describing car rides or walks that felt unusually long or short, as though their internal clock had misaligned. Intriguingly, early festival versions of Primer differ slightly from later releases. The audio in certain scenes was originally harsher, with more pronounced background noise and mechanical hums. These elements were softened in later edits, though no official comment explained why. Some fans speculated that the original mix was unintentionally taxing, contributing to the mental fog reported by early viewers. Whatever the cause, Primer remains one of the few films whose complexity seems capable of temporarily reshaping how viewers perceive time, logic, and their own thought patterns. Blade Runner 2049, 2017. When Blade Runner 2049 premiered, its reception was divided, but a curious subset of viewers reported something unusual, an emotional afterglow that didn't match their personal histories or memories. Several described waking the next morning with a sense of nostalgia for events that never happened, childhood moments that felt vivid but untraceable, or relationships that seemed emotionally real despite never existing. Fans jokingly referred to this as synthetic memory bleed, but the consistency of the reports caught attention within certain online communities. Some viewers noted that the film's hypnotic pacing and prolonged wide shots created an effect similar to guided meditation, leaving them with a heightened emotional state that persisted for hours. The combination of color gradients, particularly the deep oranges and desaturated blues, was said to produce a faint, dreamlike haze, especially in high-resolution theater projections. A few wrote that they felt temporarily slower, as though their internal sense of time had stretched to match the film's rhythm. The soundtrack became another point of speculation. Several early audiences reported that the bass tones during the San Diego sequence and Wallace Corporation scenes vibrated not only through the theater but inside the chest cavity, creating a sensation closer to physical pressure than sound. Later analyses suggested that some frequencies bordered the lower limit of conscious hearing. Interestingly, certain home releases feature a noticeably softened bass profile, though no changes were ever acknowledged publicly. One of the strangest phenomena occurred among viewers who saw multiple cuts or projections of the film. They reported subtle differences in lighting, color tone, and even character expressions, nothing drastic, but enough to provoke uncertainty about their own memory. This led to speculation that the film's atmosphere, its themes of memory manufacturing and emotional simulation, might have subtly primed the mind to question itself. Whether psychological, aesthetic, or entirely imagined, Blade Runner 2049 earned a quiet reputation as the film that didn't just depict artificial memory, it created phantom traces of its own. 12. Enemy 2013. Enemy has long carried a reputation for inducing more than simple confusion. Early viewers reported experiencing recurring nightmares involving giant spiders, shadowed hallways, or duplicate versions of themselves appearing in dreams in ways that felt unusually vivid. What made these accounts stand out was their similarity. Individuals described nearly identical dream imagery, despite living in different countries and seeing the film at different times. The dreams often included an untraceable sense of guilt or the feeling of confronting a version of themselves they didn't recognize. Some even noted that their dreams were shot strangely in the same yellow tint that permeates the film. On social media, viewers began discussing short-lived psychological disturbances after viewing the movie. Subtle derealization, moments of emotional detachment, or the eerie sensation that they were being mirrored by someone just outside their field of view. A few claimed that hallway lights in their homes appeared slightly dimmer that night, or that everyday objects felt unusually heavy, as though reality had thickened. These reports were far from universal, but they were consistent among those who experienced them. Critics later speculated that the film's pacing and color palette may have contributed to these reactions. The oppressive yellow filter, combined with Villeneuve's slow, breath-held editing, creates a sense of suffocating inevitability that gradually wears on the viewer's subconscious. The score, a series of unsettling drones and metallic pulses, was also rumored to contain near-infrasound elements, though nothing was ever confirmed. When the film arrived on streaming platforms, enthusiasts comparing versions noticed subtle changes. A few shots seemed softened, shadows slightly less stark, the sound mix marginally reduced in its lowest frequencies. No official explanation was given. Whether intentional or incidental, Enemy continues to be cited as a film that crawls under the skin, not with jump scares, but with an uncanny residue that lingers long after its final, unforgettable image. 13. Under the Skin, 2013. From its premiere, Under the Skin provoked reactions that went far beyond simple discomfort. The film's cold detachment, alien perspective, and hypnotic sound design seemed to create a psychological afterimage in certain viewers. Many reported feeling emotionally blunted for several hours, as though their empathy had dimmed. Others described the opposite, a surge of inexplicable sadness, detached from any personal memory. A common theme emerged: people felt observed, as if their awareness had split into two vantage points, the self-experiencing reality and a distant version silently witnessing it. Threads on cinephile forums documented viewers who saw faint visual distortions along the edges of their vision for the rest of the day, darkened outlines, slight warping, or the sensation that hallways seemed longer than usual. Some attributed this to the film's deeply unnatural sense of space, extended shots where time seemed suspended, faces held a beat too long, or environments stripped of emotional cues. The brain, confronted with such alien framing, may temporarily struggle to recalibrate. One of the most discussed anomalies came from the soundtrack. Several viewers claimed that certain low, thrumming tones during the void sequences felt as though they were resonating inside their chest rather than through the theater speakers. Later home releases reduced some of these sub-bass elements, and the contrast between cuts became noticeable among enthusiasts comparing editions. As months passed, a pattern formed. Under the Skin didn't scare people, it altered their emotional register. For reasons no one could fully articulate, the film's perspective lingered, casting ordinary human interactions in an unfamiliar light. Like an echo of the alien observer, the feeling faded slowly, leaving behind only the memory of having briefly experienced the world from a place slightly outside oneself. 14. Coherence, 2013. No one expected a micro-budget film shot largely in a living room to generate some of the most persistent psychological reactions reported by viewers of any modern sci-fi release. Yet Coherence did exactly that. The film's structure fractured timelines, duplicate selves, and reality loops seemed to trigger something unusual in the minds of certain audiences. Many wrote that, for several hours after watching, they felt slightly disoriented, as though the position of objects in their home had shifted by small, almost imperceptible degrees. A few described the unnerving sense of walking into a room and forgetting why they entered, not due to distraction, but because the purpose itself felt like it had belonged to a different version of them. Online discussions recorded people experiencing memory slippage after viewing, momentary confusion about whether conversations had already happened, flashes of repeated gestures, or uncertainty about the sequence of daily events. Some reported brief dissociation, an awareness of reality, feeling like a fragile layer resting atop something less stable. Most of these accounts were mild, harmless, and quickly faded, yet the consistency of the descriptions sparked speculation. The film's rapid improvisational dialogue, overlapping voices, and abrupt scene transitions may have created an unusual cognitive load, pushing the brain to constantly reorganize information. Interestingly, certain international releases of Coherence differ subtly from early festival versions. The color temperature in several scenes is warmer, shadows softened, and the opening minutes trimmed by mere seconds. Fans who noticed the changes suggested that the original cut's harsher, more chaotic pacing may have contributed to the mental after effects. The director never commented on any alterations. In the years that followed, the movie gained an odd reputation. The film that temporarily makes viewers feel like they're slipping between their own timelines. Rational explanations exist, but the lingering unease people describe the sense that the world is just slightly misaligned remains unaccounted for. Pitneist, Annihilation 2018. When Annihilation was first released, most discussions centered on its dreamlike visuals, refracted ecosystems, and the unsettling logic of Area X. But buried among early audience reactions were comments that didn't fit the usual language of film critique. Viewers across different countries reported experiencing a strange pattern of intrusive imagery hours after leaving the theater, shimmering landscapes appearing momentarily in peripheral vision, flashes of refracted light bending across ordinary interiors, and a lingering sense that colors felt slightly off, as though something had shifted in their perception. Some described a form of cognitive doubling, a sudden awareness of their own thoughts as if being observed from a slight distance. Others mentioned recurring dreams of the lighthouse, always from angles not shown in the film, as though their minds were generating missing footage. On Reddit and Letterboxd, threads quietly accumulated with similar testimonies: déjà vu linked to foliage, sudden pauses in memory, emotional surges without clear triggers. A few users noted that the theater's audio during the final sequence seemed to vibrate their ribcage more than normal bass frequencies should allow. Weeks later, subtle changes began appearing between theatrical, streaming, and physical releases. The final confrontation's sound mix was softened, low-frequency pulses reduced, and a particular flare of light previously sharp and disorienting appeared slightly smoothed. No patch notes, no explanations. Inside certain communities, a rumor formed that the film accidentally incorporated a visual rhythm that interfered with the brain's pattern recognition process. Nothing harmful, nothing proven, just enough to unsettle. Supporters pointed out that Garland is known for precise, hypnotic editing, and that the shimmer itself is built around the concept of refracted consciousness. Whether coincidence or not, Annihilation gained a quiet reputation as the movie that didn't just depict altered states, it briefly, inexplicably, created them. Bonus: Jacob's Ladder, 1990. Although not strictly a sci-fi film in the traditional sense, Jacob's Ladder occupies a space so deeply intertwined with altered perception that many viewers have quietly grouped it alongside mind-bending speculative cinema. Over the years, a surprising number of people have reported unusual psychological effects after watching it, many involving vivid, intrusive dreams or momentary shifts in emotional perspective. Some viewers described waking in the middle of the night with the uncanny certainty that someone had been standing beside their bed, only to find an empty room. Others spoke of hearing their name whispered as they drifted between sleep and wakefulness, a liminal state the film explores with unsettling accuracy. Several online discussions reveal instances where viewers felt inexplicably anxious for hours after the credits rolled. Not due to fear, but because reality itself seemed slightly unstable. Familiar streets appeared subtly elongated, conversations felt distant, everyday sounds carried a hollow, echoing quality that reminded them of the film's oppressive audio landscape. A few people even reported a transient inability to recall whether certain memories were real or imagined, fleeting confusion that subsided quickly but left a lasting impression. Critics have long suggested that the film's rapid alternation between harsh realism and surreal distortion can momentarily disrupt cognitive stability. The stark lighting changes, abrupt editing, and muted color palette create an atmosphere that seems to bypass rational interpretation, burrowing directly into the subconscious. Early home releases of the film reportedly retained harsher tonal contrasts and slightly sharper audio peaks, elements that were softened in later remasters. Fans who noticed the differences speculated that these original traits might have contributed to the film's lingering psychological impact. For many, Jacob's Ladder didn't merely depict a fractured mental reality, it temporarily made the viewer feel as though they were inhabiting one. Even after the movie ends, its uncertainty lingers, leaving behind a faint residue of doubt about the solidity of the world around them. Some films fade the moment the screen goes dark, others leave a trace, an imprint that lingers in thought, dream, or memory long after the final frame. The titles we've uncovered tonight belong to that rare second category, stories that don't just entertain, but momentarily shift the mind that receives them. If these reports hold even a fragment of truth, then cinema may be capable of influencing us in ways we barely understand. If you want to continue exploring the hidden fractures, altered states, and quiet mysteries buried within sci-fi history, stay with us. Vaulted Futures has only begun opening the files,